Altair, Apple floppy days, Commodore, Tandy floppy days, Atari, TI floppy days. The weekend comes, the disk drive hums, ready to code for you. These days we're all happy and free. Those floppy days, the games we played, you shared with me. Those days, Motorola, Intel 6502, graphics and text are there to view. Composite, color, or RGB, program fun for you and me.
Floppy Days is recorded in a live studio.
Inside PC floppy days, ST Amiga floppy days, Junior Sinclair floppy days, classic days, microwaves, geeking all week with you. These days we're all happy and free. Those floppy days, the games we play, you shared with me. Those days, these floppy days are yours and mine. These floppy days are yours and mine. Floppy days.
All right, so hi, this is Ed Smith. I'm the person who was a part of the video game and personal computer design team at APF Electronics in New York. We developed the MP1000 video game, and we developed the Imagination Machine personal computer. And I am happy to say that this has been an excellent discussion with Randy on the Floppy Days podcast.
The TRS-80 Model 3 introducing the Apple IIc. Atari 1040 ST. Commodore 64.
PC Junior, new from IBM.
Discover Atari. It's at his Radio Shack Color Computer 3. Introducing the Timex Sinclair 1000.
For computer, this is the one. Texas Instruments home computer.
A wonder computer of the 1980s. The Commodore VIC-20.
Hello, and welcome to episode, wait for it, that's right, episode 100 of the Floppy Days podcast. I'm Randy Kindig, the host, which I assume most of you know by now if you're listening over 7 years from the inception of this podcast. I want to truly express my appreciation to all the listeners of the podcast. The number of downloads each month remains strong, and I'm truly honored by the feedback I get and the loyalty and appreciation for the podcast that I continually have expressed to me by you guys. In this special episode, we're going to take a slight break from the ongoing series about the BBC Micro in order to bring you an interview with an amazing gentleman who was intimately involved with the development of the game system, the APF MP1000, and the follow-up development that turned the MP1000 into a home computer, the Imagination Machine, or IM-1. That gentleman is, of course, Mr. Ed Smith, whose voice you heard at the beginning of this episode. Regular listeners may recall that we did an episode of Floppy Days that covered the MP1000 and IM-1 back in 2014 as episode 22. I had heard of Ed Smith at the time and had seen an article about him in the Black Enterprise magazine, but never tried to contact him at that time. Fast forward to today, Ed recently published a book entitled Imagine That, about his time at APF developing computers, and I saw a notice about it on the APF Consoles and Computers mail group. Someone from the group, Lance Squire, whom you may remember hearing from the earlier episode, helped me get in contact with Ed, and he was gracious enough to agree to an interview. Next month, we'll continue the series on the BBC Micro. In the meantime, please enjoy this interview with the computer pioneer.
This is Lance Squire, APF Imagination Machine enthusiast, and you are listening to Floppy Days.
Okay, now I'm going to talk about new acquisitions and what I've been up to. First of all, I completed my collection of books by Brian Bagnall, his Commodore series. I finally picked up the last book in his series, the one called Commodore, The Final Years. Now, I'm still in the process of reading this series of books, but I really want to have the full series in order to have the full history of Commodore. And Brian does a great job in his books, and I can't wait to actually finish reading them. Also, on the Raspberry Pi front, I picked up a subscription to the Magpie magazine, which talks about the Raspberry Pi. They tend to have a lot of articles about how to use the Raspberry Pi with your vintage computer or to emulate vintage computers, and so that's why I'm talking about that on this podcast. I also picked up the new Pi 4 8 gigabyte that just came out. As soon as it came out, I ordered it, and as soon as it was available, basically that is a fun little machine to play with. The Pi 4, especially the 8 gigabyte version, can essentially be used as a desktop computer. But again, I'm buying these basically, one, to learn about them, but two, as peripherals for my vintage computers. I bought in a past episode I mentioned that I have been buying some digital versions of the Fusion magazine. There have been some specials. I know there was one on the CPC. There was a special about the Commodore 64. And just recently they came out with a special on the Amiga. So I picked up the digital version of that. Shipping's a little bit much, shipping from the UK to the US, so I've not been buying the print magazines. But I did pick up the digital version. It's a great magazine. You might want to check it out at fusiongamemag.com. I also picked up some other magazines, some Current Notes magazine. Now, this is an Atari magazine from back in the day. Originally covered the Atari 8-bits, and then later moved into really great coverage of the Atari STs. They always did a great job of covering the computer shows that were going on at the time, and I am doing a research project to really document more some of the Atari shows, like World of Atari and Atari Fest, that occurred back in the 80s and 90s. And Current Notes did a great job of covering a lot of those shows. So I loved Current Notes magazine back in the day. I think I had a subscription at one time, and I no longer have any of those. So I picked up a few of those online. I got 4 issues of Current Notes. I don't plan to get them all, but it was kind of fun to pick those up and to read through those. And that's it all as far as what I'm going to talk about in terms of new acquisitions this month. Next month, I will actually have some hardware acquisitions to talk about. I just haven't had a chance to really play with those and test them and get familiar with them, so I decided not to talk about them on this episode, but I will talk about them for the next show. However, I did want to mention a new podcast that I'm going to be involved in, and I'm really happy to be able to announce that I'm going to be working with my good friend Earl Evans, who originally got me started in podcasting, and I think it was 7 years ago, actually, that he started a podcast called Next Without 4, having to do with vintage programming languages and programming for vintage computers. And he had 2 episodes, and then life kind of got in the way, and he wasn't able to continue that. Recently, he asked me. He knew that I had a strong interest in that topic. With my master's in computer science, I've always had a strong interest in computer languages. I love all the different computer languages available for the vintage computers, and I try to acquire as many of those as I can. So he asked me if I'd be interested in rebooting that podcast with him, and I was honored and agreed to do so. And so we have published our first episode and are planning to continue to do monthly episodes. So check out nextwithout4.org, and if you're interested at all in vintage computer languages or programming for vintage computers. And that's it for new acquisitions and what I've been up to.
Hi, it's Earl Evans, retro computing podcaster and enthusiast, and you're listening to Randy Kindig on the Floppy Days podcast.
Okay, next, real quick, I'm going to go over the show schedule for the remaining part of the year. Of course, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the show schedule is pretty much a mess. Most shows have gone virtual, except for the ones that are scheduled for pretty late in the year. They could still go virtual, but at this point in time are not. So let me run through this real quick. July 24th through 25th is Kansas Fest, has gone virtual, and it costs $20 to register. It sounds like they've gotten a lot of people signing up because now there's no longer any barriers to going to that show in terms of travel or time off, because now it's 2 days instead of a week. And, you can just join from your home. So it's going to be great. There's going to be so many people involved in that. August 1st through the 2nd, VCF West was going to be at the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, California, but this also has been announced to be going virtual. The Fujiyama show in Langenfeld, Germany is August 20th through the 23rd. As far as I know, at this point in time, it's still planned and is still planned to be an in-person event. September 12th through the 13th will be VCF Midwest in Elmhurst, Illinois. Currently, still planned to be an in-person event. October 10th through the 12th, VCF East. This is the rescheduled VCF East in Wall, New Jersey. And at this point in time, the rescheduled event is still planned to be held in person. October 24th, the Chicago TI International World Fair at the Evanston Public Library in Evanston, Illinois. Still planned and still in person. October 30th through November 1st is Tandy Assembly in Springfield, Ohio. As a member of the planning group for that, I can tell you it's still planned to be an in-person event at this point in time. And then in December, usually the first weekend in December, it's not been announced yet. There's no word on the website yet, but the World of Commodore that's typically held in Ontario, Canada is, I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be held this year or not, but I wanted to mention it for those people who typically attend that show each year. And that's it for upcoming shows. And then finally, I want to go through one piece of feedback that I got. This is from Rama. Rama says, "This is Rama from Indonesia. First of all, I would like to say congratulations for reaching 100 episodes of the Floppy Days podcast. The last time I sent you an email was March 2015, so it's been 5 years, and it means I have been your listener longer than that. I'm now collecting all of your podcast episodes, including Antic, the Atari podcast. So far, I've got 99 episodes of Floppy Days, 70 episodes of Antic, and 388 interviews. How's that for podcasts? During this milestone achievement and also, unfortunately, terrible pandemic, I would like to say thank you and another congratulations. I'm not able to go out to my office for 3 months now and have been re-listening to many episodes of Floppy Days and Antics since then. Gives me great pleasure and awesome moments. So go on and produce another 100 episodes." Thank you so much, Rama, for writing. I want to note that I went back and looked, and Rama indeed had sent me an email back in March 2015. I actually remember this email, and when I got the recent one, I thought the name sounded familiar, because it turns out that Rama is blind and uses a screen reader to operate his computer. So I am totally amazed at Rama's ability to operate a computer this way, and I'm honored by having such a loyal listener. Thank you again, Rama. And that's it for feedback this month. Today we have with us Ed Smith, one of the developers of the MP1000 game console and the IM-1 and IM-2 personal computers. Ed's written a book recently called Imagine That, the story of Ed Smith, one of the first African-American engineers to work in the design of video games and the Imagination Machine personal computer. How are you today, Ed?
I'm doing great. How are you, Andy?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you spending some time with me today. So to start out, maybe we can just have you talk just real briefly about where you live and what you do today.
So today I live in Florida, and I'm doing a lot of work in promoting the education of computer technology and programming to inner city youths in their schools.
Okay, well, that sounds like that keeps you busy.
Yeah, it's a noble task, and it requires a lot of time investment, a lot of re-education as to the way our children are being educated, and we have to move away from the legacy of 100 years of the same curriculum in schools and get schools to understand that, especially in the inner city, our students need to be moved above the ladder, and curriculums need to include things like coding at a very young age. And I truly believe that if our youth in the inner city can learn to write rap music and learn the lyrics of rap songs in a heartbeat with the right motivation, they should be able to learn coding as well.
How you first learned about electronics and home computers?
So I first started to get into electronics at a very young age. I was one of those kids who was always inquisitive, and in the neighborhood there was a guy who was an electrician. At least I thought he was an electrician. He would fix the lights and doorbells and anything electronic in the house. And probably at the age of around 10 or 11, I would act as his helper. So I would give him the tools out of the toolbox. I started quickly to learn what wire cutters were and all of the other tools that were in the toolbox. And that was really the start of my getting into the field of electronics. After that one introduction with that electrician, I thought I knew enough to go ahead and start to fix some appliances for the folks in the neighborhood on my own, which I did. And that knowledge got me to be accepted at Westinghouse High School, which is a magnet school for electronics. And that's really where my career took off.
So you got a job with APF, so maybe you can tell us a little bit about APF. What does that stand for? What do they do? And how you got the job there?
Okay, yes. So APF, the initials stand for Albert and Philip Friedman, who were the principals of the company at that time. And APF started out in the import business, importing electronics from Asia, mainly calculators and adding machines. So they had a lot of history around the calculator and adding machine business, and actually started to develop their own computer in the early 70s based on what they learned in that business. And they started to become a very successful company. One of their biggest distributors was Sears. So they got a lot of business just going to Sears with their imported products. So APF was around since I think around 1971, 71. I joined APF as a design engineer since I was able to understand the microprocessor technology that I learned while working at a company called Marvelite, which was in the business of manufacturing traffic control signals. As luck would have it for me, the folks at Fairchild, when they were just introducing their new microprocessor, they went out to almost every firm who developed anything electronically and tried to get them to utilize microprocessor technologies for those products. And it turns out that the traffic control business was perfect for the use of microprocessor technology. So at Marvelite, I was chosen along with another person to learn by Fairchild microprocessor technology. And that education that I got from Fairchild while working at Marblite got me the job at APF. And that was really the job that pretty much propelled my career to whatever levels came after that.
Okay, so APF decided to develop a game console called the MP1000. I actually had an earlier show where I talked about the MP1000 and the Imagination Machine. So it's really great to talk to someone who was involved with that. But can you tell me about the development of that console and how that came about and what your role was?
Yes, absolutely. So at Marblite, one of the things that, if you understand anything around traffic control technology, is all about output. And the output from microprocessor standpoint is the bus architectures. And that's really what I studied studied at Fairchild when I was with Marblite. So when I came to APF as a part of a 4-person engineering team, that's all we had. We had 2 programmers and 2 hardware designers, and I was on the hardware side. I took that bus knowledge that I had to the team, and my role was primarily around helping to design the cartridge slot as well as the joysticks, and then something around the video output as well. So each one of us had our own roles to play. The design of the MP1000 came from the work that was already done on an earlier video game that APF had, which was a Pong game. It was called TV Fun. So we had some knowledge on how to design a video game, but not to the extent where we are now working with 8-bit microprocessors and color graphics. So all of that re-engineering had to take place, and we laid out the MP1000 so that it was very simple to remanufacture. It had all of the necessary hardware components built into it, so that if we needed to do something differently, we can come out with another unit that could be an advanced model of the original design. So if you ever looked at a schematic of the MP1000, you will see that it's a very simplistic design with a processor, a peripheral interface adapter, RAM and ROM all laid out very cleanly so that anyone could pretty much redesign that product if they chose to. And by the way, when it came to designing any of the video games and personal computers of those days, there was no worry about violating any copyrights. Everything was pretty much out in the open.
Okay, so can you tell us about some of the challenges you ran into as you were developing that console? Maybe some interesting stories around things that you ran into while you were trying to design it, I guess, and build it.
So some of the major challenges we had at APF was first and foremost around selecting the microprocessor. We went through a number of iterations. We reverse engineered the Apple II, the TRS-80, and the Commodore PET to come up with what we thought was, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry. We reverse engineered the Atari first for the video game side, and we took a look at what they were doing. We saw the chipset that they had. We didn't want to be that much of a copycat, so we went with a different chipset, which was the Motorola 6800. The problem with that chipset is there was not a lot of folks who were trained on that technology. That was our biggest challenge. And that was some of the frustrations we had because we had to continue to go back to Motorola during a time when the only chance you had to get any information was either through a 500-page book or to make a phone call. So getting answers became very strenuous, especially when you're trying to meet deadlines. So being at the bleeding edge of that chip technology from Motorola really hampered us as far as the level of knowledge we could gain so that we can build that unit and get it out into the marketplace.
And how involved were you in the actual announcement and rollout of the machine?
Yes, so for the MP1000, once we had that unit complete And I think we had our game programmer come out with 3 games initially. We took that unit to the CES show and we displayed it there. We also showed it to our good friends at Sears, our major distributor. They loved the game as well. And I was one of the folks who would demonstrate the games, and I would talk about the internal operations of the MP1000. So that was really for a kid that came from the environment from which I did, to begin to go out with the salespeople and talk about this hardware, this MP1000, was a very strong launching point for me when you didn't have a lot of folks who knew how to talk about this type of technology.
How successful was it, and how did you feel about its rollout and what its capabilities were?
Oh, I felt really good, especially as we started to come out with more games. You know, we really were looking to not be, I hate to say it, a leader in the industry. We were more of a clone company than a leading provider of systems. So we wanted to see what our competitors were doing in the market first, and then try to come up with competing products at better price points. And that was the whole idea behind what we did at APF.
Okay, at that point, then I guess there was a decision made to basically take that game machine and turn it into a computer. What prompted that, and how did that come about?
Yeah, the that consumer electronics show that I talked about was when we first had a chance to see firsthand what Atari was doing, um, and as well as the other competitors in the marketplace. And we found out that Atari had actually made an announcement that they were planning to develop a console unit for their video game and make it into a personal computer. So just based on that announcement by Atari, and again, APF is a company that wanted to, be the next guy in the marketplace, the Avis of the marketplace. We wanted to go ahead and start to design our console unit for our video game as well. And by the way, as soon as that discussion came up, one of the first things that I was asked is, how good is the bus in the MP1000 so that we can take that bus and move it out to a console unit? And if we can do it, how do we do it? And that's when I came up with the design of what we called the J connector that took that bus and adapted it to the actual console unit so that once you plugged it in, you are now leveraging all of the processor technology in the MP1000 to that console unit. So it was really the announcement from Atari that got APF to develop the Imagination Machine.
Was there any consideration of just like redesigning it from the ground up as a computer rather than as an add-on, or did you go that route to kind of?
I'm sorry. There were numerous arguments, Randy, about what we should do when you have a conversation, and I guess this still happens today. At least it's happened in my career as it went on. When you have conversations between engineers and sales folks, they tend not to mesh. And, the folks in sales, they look at marketing, they look at numbers, they look at how much volume they can generate. And that's what their concerns are. However, in engineering, you're looking at features, functionality, quality, and all of the other things. And a price point to engineers don't make a lot of sense. So you start to have those headbutts. And then what we came out with was we wanted to have a personal computer. If we can't do it from a brand new design, we will acquiesce and do it with the MP1000. However, engineering did indeed want to, from the ground up, design our own personal computer, an expandable personal computer that was easily able to accept additional hardware similar to what the Apple was.
Okay, makes sense. So, what were some of the challenges in developing the IM-1, which is what it was ultimately called, right?
Yep, the IM-1. The key things with the IM-1 was, again, first of all, understanding that the true processing power of the IM-1 sat within the MP1000. So we had to be able to get all of the bus information, all of the processor output from the MP1000 and get that buffered effectively enough where it would not blow up, if you will, and get that into that console unit so that you can add the keyboard, that you can add additional peripherals, like an RS-232 port, a Centronics port, whatever additional memory, whatever additions you needed to have. That bus needed to be able to handle that. So that was the hardest thing, is coming up with the necessary formulas to add the necessary hardware to make that bus function as it did.
Interesting. So how much time did you actually spend from the time that you guys decided to create this add-on for the MP1000 to turn it into a computer? How much time was that until you actually had something that was ready to market?
It's interesting, Randy, because the MP1000 took longer to develop than the IM-1. And clearly it's because the MP1000, as I mentioned, it already had most of the hardware components in that unit. And then what we had to do with the IM-1 was add the keyboard, expand the bus, put in a new ROM set so that we can, make that machine do more than just play games. But the actual time that it took for us to get that design complete, I would say was around 2 to 3 months.
That's pretty fast.
Yeah, and that includes, putting together the prototype, and I think I built 2 prototypes at that time. And once the prototypes were working, we shipped them off to our offshore guys, and they put together the hardware. They got it built out, and I think another 2 months later, we saw the first unit showing up.
Nice. So were you then also involved in the rollout of that machine? And did you attend some shows and that sort of thing?
Oh yeah. So even though I did my first pitch for the MP1000, that was a very small piece. It was probably around 20 minutes that I talked about the MP1000, and I was to, just a few clients who were at the Consumer Electronics Show. When the IM-1 was complete, and that had to be displayed and demonstrated at the next CES show, there was no doubt that the executives, both from engineering and from sales, went to me and said, "You're going." And they actually changed my title. Maybe I had 2 titles at the time. I think I did. But the title that I had when I went to CES was not as a design engineer. It was now as a technical specialist. And my role was to hype the imagination machine, which I think I did very well. So I learned to do presentations in front of large crowds. I presented again to the folks at Sears. In fact, I was at the top of Sears Tower in a conference room looking out at Lake Michigan, thinking about, again, where I came from and wondering how I got to where I was. And that was the way that I went ahead and started to get the word out around the IM-1. It was at that CES show, it was at Sears, and it was at other retailers as well. And again, that role, once we got the unit complete, the role was to get the word out and to get as many sales as possible. And we did a pretty good job at that, at least initially.
Yeah, that sounds like it was a pretty exciting time, rolling out a new product like that and getting a chance to talk about it. From your perspective, how do you feel it fared in the marketplace?
Oh, not well at all, Randy. I think there was a number of roadblocks for APF at the time. And the first roadblock was the actual design of that console unit. We built a tape unit into that console. Even at the time, we knew as engineers that floppy disk technology was just being introduced. And again, when we talked about the headbutting we had with sales, and if we had designed our PC from scratch, there would be no tape drive. It would be an open architecture so that you could add anything. But again, you have to understand the market, and I understand what the sales folks were saying at the time. The market that we were going after was not the same market that the folks that were buying Apples or TRS-80s was going after. You had three markets, if I remember, and you had the geek market, right? You had the guys who just bought it because they wanted to learn it, they understood it, they would build their own boards, they would do anything they wanted to a computer, and they would go out and buy the Apple IIs, etc. And then you had the business market who wanted to buy these computers for spreadsheets, for word processing, for database, for accounting. And that was a separate market. So you had the guys who were the geeks, you had the business people. We wanted at that time with APF to go after a different market, which was the home market. And so the salespeople were telling us, if we're going to go after this market, we have to give them things that are included in the product. We can't make them add-ons. And to an extent, we understood it. We didn't like it, but we understood it. However, even at the home market a year later, everybody was going to floppy disk drives. So that dinosaur we had built in was one of the key reasons that the IM-1 did not sell.
Gotcha. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
So, because of those limitations, is that why you decided to develop the IM-2? And what really drove that decision to develop a different version of the computer?
Right. So the key decision for the IM-2 was to hide the video game. That was pretty much it. That was the reasoning that was given to us by the executives at Sears. They felt that the video game was hampering the sales of the IM-1, and they felt it was a pretty good computer, but a lot of people did not want to buy it because of the video game unit. And you have to keep in mind, Randy, that at that time, when people were looking to buy a personal computer or a video game, they would buy one or the other. Rarely did you have folks who would come in and buy a video game sitting on top of a computer console. The thing we thought at APF that would help us a lot is we had a number, thousands of MP1000s already out there. And we just thought, hey, these guys are just going to take the MP1000, add the console unit to it, and we still get 100,000 or more units sold just based on that. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. The folks who already had the MP1000 and wanted a computer, they bought a computer. They didn't buy the console unit, at least not to a large extent.
I mean, the reasoning seems sound. I mean, I could see that people may want to buy something that, hey, it starts out as a game machine, but I can turn this into a computer if I want to. I mean, that's what Atari thought, right? And that's what some of the other companies thought. So it seems like sound reasoning, but I guess it didn't work out.
Yeah, it didn't. And I think the price point, I think, had a lot to do with it. I believe the console, we were having that available for around $399, I believe. And at the time, you could buy a brand new PC for $599.
Could you actually buy the entire unit, or did you have to buy the MP1000 and then separately buy the IM-2 or IM-1? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you could buy it as a complete package.
Okay.
Or you can buy it as just the console if you already had the MP1000. So the complete package, again, was $599, which competed directly with those firms who were offering just standalone personal computers.
Sure, I understand. So it sounds like the idea behind the IM-2 was to get the game machine image or stigma or having a separate game machine out of the equation and just have a single unit that was a computer, correct?
That's exactly right. Yes.
And how exactly did you go about that process? I mean, did you take the existing, I think think in your book you talk about the fact you took an existing IM-1 and you basically modified it, right? I mean, is that the way you
Yeah.
went about it?
Yeah, I actually took the motherboard from out from the from the MP1000. I stripped off the shielding from around the sides of it. I laid it on top of the IM-1 console. I had to drill some holes to make the connections to get down to the other components within the unit, like the keyboard, etc. So I made the connection, and then I just took a simple piece of, I think it was a piece of plastic, and maybe it was from the back of the MP1000, and laid it on top of that unit. And when I showed it to the guys in engineering and to the guys in sales, and they saw that it was functioning, but they could not see the video game, they all were like, yes, that's exactly what we want. We want to see nothing but the unit. And by the way, it was so simplistic that you can take one of those 9-inch monitors that were available at the time and just sit it right on top. So you had a good footprint with that unit as well. And that was pretty much it. It didn't take a lot to turn the IM-1 into an IM-2.
Interesting. So, were there any IM-2s actually produced, or how many were developed?
There were very few, Randy. I think if I'm correct, there were less than 50 maybe that were ever made. The original prototype was housed by a guy named Marty Lipper, who was the CFO at the time. He passed away last year, and one of the writers who contacted me about my time at APF, he managed to get that from Marty's estate sale. So he has the original IM-2. And I know there's a couple that are actually out there in the marketplace, but I just don't know where they're at today.
Gotcha. And you're talking about Benj Edwards, I think, right?
Benj Edwards, yes, indeed.
Yeah, I know that name. So why did development actually stop? I mean, you said there were maybe 50 produced. What happened then at that point?
Yeah. APF was a company they were churning as a company. When they started out in the calculator and adding machine business, they were a very good company for the business that they were doing. The bankers liked what they were doing, and they were a, public company. So they were getting a lot of financing coming into them. The key thing, though, is when the sales of the IM-1 began to drain the bank, the bank gave the executives at APF an ultimatum. The bank didn't really believe. They somewhat believed in the video game business. They totally did not believe in the personal computer business. So these were bankers who were just naive, and they actually gave APF an ultimatum, which was basically, we're going to pull funding unless you guys get out of this business. And, at that time, we were already in the business. You couldn't just pull out at that time. So the bank just stopped funding us. And when the bank stopped giving us money, the doors started to close.
Gotcha. So how long were you there after for basically the IM-2 production stopped?
So I was at APF probably another year after the IM-2 was introduced. Again, even though the bank stopped funding it, we couldn't do any more production of the IM-2. But we still had the IM-1. So I was still there helping to promote the IM-1, even when we wanted to get the IM-2 out the door but could not. And I was lucky enough to have a working environment with a number of great people who, during that time, knowing that the company was going to go under, and it was just a matter of time, they held on to me until I was able to find the right opportunity, which you don't see a lot of these days. So I stayed at APF probably a good 8 months longer than I should have, just looking for another job.
So Ed, do you have any interesting stories about something that happened at APF that you could share with the audience?
Yeah, I'll give you two quickies.
Okay.
This is about we gave code names to our development work. So the MP1000, the video game, when we were doing the development work on that, Star Wars had come out, and we had arguments internally because after we saw Star Wars, I kept saying, well, that's just a nice movie, but the real deal is Star Trek. So we had this argument about which was best, Star Wars or Star Trek, and the Star Trek argument won out. Most of the guys in engineering preferred Star Trek. So when we codenamed the MP1000, the code name was Spock. So if you talk to anyone who was at APF at the time, and you just say, how's Spock, they would know what you're talking about. And then when it came to the IM-2, we spent a lot of hours, late hours, getting these things done, and that's why the time frame was so short. We were doing Geek Stuff before Geek Stuff was popular. So when it came to the IM-2, working late, myself and Craig, the other engineer, we're just heads down on some things, and he gets a phone call, and it's his girlfriend. I didn't know who she was. He just hung up and said, yeah, that's my girlfriend. And I kept saying to Craig, well, why are you still here? And you can be hanging out with your girlfriend. And he told me her name, which was Myrtle. And I would just give him these little zingers as we were working. And I would say things like, well, this machine isn't as sexy as Myrtle. I don't think the lines on this machine are as good as Myrtle. I was just ribbing him for about a good half hour or so. And as we got done, the IM-2 was adaptly named Myrtle.
They got to have code names, right? So that's
got to have code names. Yeah, yeah. So Myrtle was an interesting one just because of his girlfriend.
Yeah.
There were other things I said, but I can't say them on this podcast.
Oh, so. Gotcha. We're a clean podcast.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm with you on the Star Trek. I prefer Star Trek over Star Wars, though. But then,
yep.
I've got an engineering background too. So where did you go after APF?
So after APF, I was lucky enough to get a position at Apple. And the role was, again, the same thing, technical specialist. I had the responsibility to help all of the Apple dealers in the upstate New York territory. So I moved from Brooklyn, thank you, to Albany. And I was responsible for all of the dealers from Plattsburgh, New York, which was right up by Canada, all the way down to White Plains in the south. So I would drive around to Apple dealers. I would show them new things. I would help them with their expansion cards. I would write some quick programs for them. They would show me things that were going on that kept me educated because that business at that time, it was growing so quickly, and there were always these add-ons that you would see pop up. Add-ons for the disabled, add-ons for robotics, add-ons for many, many different things that unless you were seeing it at these dealerships, you wouldn't even know these things are available. Or if you're reading technical magazines, I guess. But that introduction to all of those new technologies while at Apple was a revelation.
All right. And then you recently wrote a book on your life and career that I mentioned at the beginning of this interview. And, I ordered it immediately and got a chance to read through it. So I enjoyed the book, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate you writing that. I'm curious as to what the impetus was for writing it. Why did you write it?
So, Randy, the key impetus for me was when I was contacted by Benj Edwards, and this is going back, probably a good 5 years ago now. Up until that time, I was just doing my thing, which was, as of late, around global strategic alliances, working with the largest firms in the industries to help them move to whatever the latest technologies were. And then I got a call from Benj, and we did this lengthy interview that got published, as you know, out there on Fast Company. And Vintage Computing. And I just thought that was the end of it. But it wasn't. I would get emails, I would get phone calls, I would be asked to speak about certain things around my time at APF. And it occurred to me that based on one of the questions that was asked of me at the time, And that question was something like, well, how are you going to be able to document your legacy? It never occurred to me at the time that I needed to do something like that. And it didn't occur to me either that I was one of only 2 African Americans to work in the design of video games and personal computers in the 70s, early 70s. The other one being Jerry Lawson, as you might know.
Uh-huh.
So when the question came to me, I had to take a seat back and think about this. And I thought, yeah, I need to get this out so that people know that I was there. And they need to know how I got there, the struggles that I went through while I was there, and how I came out better on the other side. So just making sure that that story is being told and not told by someone else was the reason for the book.
Gotcha. So I'm curious about the process in developing the book. Did you do this all from memory, or did you have some written notes you had taken along the way, or how did you come up with everything that was in the book?
Everything came from memory.
Okay, that's pretty good.
No notes. Yeah. It was something that, frankly, I didn't even realize I remembered until the questions came to me from Benj. So as he started asking me certain questions, my mind just flipped right back to those days, and it was as if I was still there. I remembered everything.
Yeah, I'm lucky if I remember my name from one day to the next.
I know.
That's
Well,
pretty
if I
good.
talked to my wife about remembering things, it would be a different story. But I
Right.
did remember those things. Yeah.
Awesome. So, as people read your book, is there one specific thing that you want them to take away from what you've written?
Yeah, Randy. So the one thing that I didn't mention when I talked about one of the other reasons for writing the book is to make sure that people of color have a chance to read it, young people of color have a chance to read it, and that it would motivate them to get into the field of technology. That is a very big reason for writing the book, because if you see what's going on today, you probably know the numbers. You know, it's like 7% of African Americans are in the field of technology. That needs to change because, as you know, that is the world that we're in. Everything we do today is based on technology. So you just can't have a child going through the standard educational process and expect them to have the opportunities that are out there for them in this field. So they need to read it, see that other people have done it, and when they see that someone like myself was successful in doing it, hopefully it will motivate them to take that step as well.
Yeah, that's an excellent reason to write a book.
Yeah.
How has it been received so far? I know it hasn't been out very long, but
Yeah.
how,
Well,
how has it been received so far?
Randy, the coronavirus kind of like stalled a lot of what we were trying to do with the book and with public speaking as well. So there were a number of events that I had planned to attend to get the word out, a number of schools that I had planned to attend. I probably had a good 15 appointments in the first 6 months of this year that were canceled. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to get the word out as much as I could, but the book is still doing relatively well. A few hundred copies have been sold since then. And I'm doing a lot of the podcasts and a lot of the things that I can do over the internet, a lot of Zoom stuff as well. So hopefully over time, the word will get out. But I'll be honest with you, if folks like yourself and others who have already heard my story and have read the book and understand what challenges I was able to overcome, over time, I'm sure it will get out to the rest of the world as well.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. And, all the stuff you've talked about in the interview, all that stuff is in the book and a lot more. So I would certainly encourage people to get the entire story by getting your book. Maybe you could talk about how they would actually get a copy of it.
I certainly can. So the book is available on Amazon. You can do a quick search, which is Imagine That with an exclamation point at the end of Imagine That. And if you really want to get to it quickly, just Google Ed Smith, Imagine That, and I'm sure it will pop right up on the first screen when you do a search.
Yep, I didn't have any trouble finding it at all. So,
Great. Excellent.
yeah,
That's good to
yeah.
know.
So I just have a couple of questions here to kind of close the interview out with. Do you stay in touch with any of the people you worked with at APF?
I would love to. My mentor at APF was a guy named Ken Boylan. He passed away 3 years ago. His brother was Howard Boylan, and he was the VP of sales. He's the last person that I am communicating with from my days at APF. That's the last person that I know where I at least have a contact. Everyone else, I have either lost touch or they have passed on.
And I'm also curious whether you have an MP1000, IM-1, or IM-2 in your home today. Do you actually have any of the machines?
Absolutely.
Got them all?
I have the MP1000 and the IM-1. I don't have an IM-2, but I do have the video game and the console unit.
Okay, excellent. Do you ever get them out? Do you ever do anything with them?
I went to Benj Edwards' house a year or so ago, and we put them all up, and we played around with both the IM-1 and the IM-2. But I haven't really put the one that I have together at my house in probably about 2 years, but I do plan to do it just for nostalgic purposes.
Okay. Well, I think I pretty much ran out of questions. The last thing I wanted to kind of ask you was, most of the listeners of this podcast are interested in vintage computers. And of course, a lot of them are interested in vintage game consoles as well. It kind of goes together. But is there anything you'd like to say to the listeners of this podcast?
Yeah, so when it comes to vintage computing, I'm sure the folks on this podcast know about all of the more popular machines that were available at that time. I would say that for APF, we had a small slice of a very big pie during that time in vintage computing. We were just as good as our competitors that were in the marketplace at the time, but at the end of the day, there was only one winner. So even though APF was out there, people have to understand, and you guys know this, so was Commodore, so was Radio Shack, so was Mattel with the Intellivision. There were a number of personal computer products that were out there. None of them
None of them made
were
it, did they?
successful. None of them.
Yeah.
The only one that did make it was the Apple.
Right.
Right? So that's the story I would leave everybody with, because I hear this a lot is why wasn't you guys successful? What happened? What went wrong? Well, everything went wrong because Apple was the best.
Well, now IBM PC came along and really pushed everybody out. So,
Oh, well, Apple blew it, right? Because they had the same open architecture that IBM just took from them. Apple had to go ahead and make the Apple III first, which was a disaster, and then the Lisa, which was another disaster.
right.
And they closed their architecture, and no one liked it. And then IBM just came out with this PC that had the same thing that Apple had with the Apple II. And guess what? They were successful.
They sure were.
Yeah. Apple blew it. I said that as soon as that happened, I said they're going to blow it. And it certainly happened. Yeah.
All right. Well, Ed, that's all the questions I had. Is there anything that I should have asked that I didn't?
No, Randy, I think you've been a great interviewer. The only thing I would leave folks with, especially if people hear this and they're looking to get into this field and they're already doing something else, I would say that in the immortal words of Yogi Berra, when you get to the fork in the road, just take it.
Good advice. Good advice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate it. It's been awesome talking with you, and you did some amazing work. So it's much appreciated. And like I said, I enjoyed your book, and I wish you the best of luck. And please feel free to stay in touch.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you, Randy. And by the way, I have a website. It is imaginethat2.com. So there's information there as well.
Perfect. I'll make sure to include that.
Great.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks again, Randy.
All right.
Thanks for having me. Take care.
All right. Bye. I want to give out special thanks to Lance Squire for helping me get in contact with Ed for the interview. And of course, I want to thank Ed so much for agreeing to come onto the podcast and regale us with stories of his time developing the MP1000 and IM-1 machines. I provided links in the show notes for all the great websites we discussed during this podcast. Just go to floppydays.com for the full list. I very much encourage you to provide feedback for the show at iTunes or on the website, via email at floppydays@gmail.com, via Twitter at floppydays, or on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/floppydays. Floppy Days is available for streaming at Stitcher.com, and for Android users can be downloaded from Google Play. You also can ask Alexa to stream Floppy Days from the TuneIn service. Just say, Alexa, play the podcast Floppy Days and listen to the latest episode. Until the next show, pull out a vintage computer and compute as if it were yesterday. Bye.